begin by saying that the Surrey Muse gatherings take place on the unceded territories of the Simu, Katsi, Kwiketlam, Kwantlen, Kiket, Twasin, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Surrey Muse gatherings feature a poet and an author and a performer, each for 20 minutes, and then we have 6 minutes for the open mic, and then we proceed with 3 to 5 minute pieces from the open mic participants to bring us to the end. I'd like to begin with a few notes, or since so much has been happening since we began in March to go with the virtual gatherings. At Surrey Muse Art Society, we are of the mind, spirit, and body, a whole, that our sovereignty does and shall lie with the Indigenous and First Peoples of wherever we operate and reside. Further, that art is indeed intricately woven in with all aspects of life. It is a powerful tool with which we make stands, take stands, speak against injustice and hypocrisy, where we stimulate dialogue and change. Facilitation of artistic expression is a driving force of building live communities, giving way to individual and collective scopes of subsistence and self-determination, as well as personal and collective healing. It is in the act of everyday discourse and through the exchange of honest and genuine gathering. Yet our art is not ripe with commodity ability or commodity willingness. Thus, this expression and our activity is regularly suppressed and oppressed. As with race and economics, and with the many isms in between, there is such dichotomy, framed like dissected organs, isolated from one another, as if in a coroner's lab. And just in the same vein, so too are political and economic systems incongruent with diverse cultural empowerment. Indigenous ways of living, as well as various forms of living life in collectivity, are actively suppressed in society. Communities in any nation are struggling for the means to define the way they want to live. In our actions and expressions, we must work to recognize that dominant concepts behind major understandings about success, human nature, and how to live on earth are designed in opposition to peoples who have lived in a balance. Any original nation, any community, class, race, village, family, child, individual that moves with this propensity to nurture life as a purpose in of itself is marked for danger. From all walks of life, we must dismantle this. We must hold space for learning from those of us who have fundamental knowledge on how to live on earth, where every being is in ecosystem and in a habitat, not as toxic and parasitic. I'm pleased to present to you our featured author, Joanne Arnett. Joanne Arnett is a Métis mixed blood writer, editor, mentor, and arts activist, originally from Manitoba, at home on the West Coast. Joanne received the Gerald Lambert Award for Best First Book of Poetry in 1992 and the Vancouver Mayor's Art Award for Literary Arts, acknowledging the body of her work in 2017. She has published 9 poetry books and chapbooks, a collection of short nonfiction, and a children's illustrated piece. Recent publications include her 3rd poetry chapbook, Pensive and Beyond, from Nomados Press in 2019, and the co-edited volume Honoring the Strength of Indian Women, Plays, Stories, and Poetry by Vera Manuel, through University of Manitoba Press in 2019. Joanne is a poetry mentor for the Writer's Studio at SFU and poetry editor for Event Magazine. Over the years, she has collaborated with many writers and artists, mounting literary events in Richmond, where she lives with her family, and working on a variety of publications with Richmond Writers Group, Aboriginal Writers Collective, West host an Asian Canadian writers workshop.
Hi all, this is Joanne Arnett. Thank you to Surrey Muse for inviting me and to the fabulous fellow artists presenting tonight. I wanted to begin by acknowledging the passing of Daniel David Moses. He's a friend of mine and a pen pal. I wanted to share one of his poems to begin. It's from a sequence called Calendar, and the poem is July. Here in the maple shade, keys come spiraling down like birds dead with outspread wings. So come away through the unkempt orchard across grass colored like sand down to the stagnant remains of the creek. Ignore the cattails that finger the cumulus for passing us over. Instead, consider along that bank further by the ripe and shining wheat field runs a fiery border, a profusion of tiger lilies. Every spotted trumpet bears half a dozen promises, stamens that tremble like water, though solid and soil-colored. I'll share a few poems from my newest collection that came out in December from Nomadov Press. It's a chapbook of poetry called Pensive and Beyond. And the themes of the chapbook are friendship and death, although not every poem is about those things. Love Song for Donda Hamchit. She dances into our lives, clear-eyed, sensitive, booming with joy. She loves the children, she lifts them up. She loves the mothers, she lifts us up. She loves the fathers, she lifts them up. She dances into line, holding the space between the ancestors and those who have yet to come. This beautiful landscape, full of honor and opportunity, a place we may all love to be. Yes, there is grief here. Yes, there is fear as well. Yes, there is disappointment. She dances with beauty, weaving community, walking in a good way, paddling the long journey with us, for us, before us, in celebration. Homage for J.D. Reed. The writer's room is an underworld through which the heavens shine and cloud over. The writer's job is to wait, to pounce like a cat, opportunistically, to play with the mouse of enlightenment. The writer's descent and ascent and descent and ascent mark the rhythm of life, the chariot pulling the sun, the writer in labor. The sound of the love of his life calling him back, and the life-giving pummel of her hand on his breast. The vision of Tama, super station master of Wakayama Electric Railway's Kishigawa line, calico in waiting, her tilted station master's hat. Competing claims on the writer's senses, clear directions that cannot be synced, possible reasons for an unscheduled, rueful departure. Relational poetics from the man whose path was on fire, homages through fake poems, an arc of beauty, a riff of humanity. Fruits of location, uplift. I can't see you, I can't hear you. I continue staring into what I believe to be your direction, your general direction, your part of the world. I have heard of you before. You sounded interesting. You sounded like you may be a bit like me. As I am a pauper, I thought perhaps that your words, your thoughts, and your feelings might be nourishing. I have been sending away the tentacles and the small, small birds of my wishes in your direction. I want to say, speak up, but concerns of obscuring the sound of your long-awaited voice prevent me. I have been sending away my proboscis, smell tasting for you, seeking. My dreams have been stirring. My dreams have sat with heavy haunches. Sea Change, the poem for John Astor, and the begins with a quote, "Poets by nature who challenge death." Death is a kind of silence, slowly overtaking us, the distance never breached, the hopes slowly eased out of view or snapped, startling. Passion flowing rhythmic, warm heat of cohabitation, you and me and you, the cradling of the other in the vast whole. Silence is a kind of death, slowly overtaking us, the chatter never slowed, the words rarely faltering, the plans strictly limited, improvisational. A couple of poems for poets who are alive and, and with us. The first is called Brief Love for Annie Ross. A nimble, broken love song sweeping across the dust of creation. Weaving poem image, she asks why. She says, see this? She holds up her hands. In her hands we see the dust of creation, the creatures that grow from the soil. Under a hot historical sun, the rains fall from her fingertips. Sometimes we don't remember the order that we put the poems in. There it is. It's a poem inspired by reading Goran Simic's, one of his collections. Sunrise in the eyes of a snowman, the look of the world through the eyes of a drowned deer. Poetry, the vast reclamation, slipping into another language, sliding the whole self all the way through. So here's a pair of poems that I wrote for a couple, a literary couple, originally from Iran and many years based in London, England. Pari Mansour passed away this spring, and her husband, Mahmoud Kianish, is still with us in this time of pandemic. A song of farewell. Fly free, rare bird of life, whose struggle into form and through and within form is almost done, this consecration, this lifetime. All of the work that came into hand passes now into other hands. All of the strenuous mind and heart, efforts to make sense of, streaming, now quiet, slow, surrender. As you drift in the void, that oneness so pristine, so sullied, effortless and effortful, one with the flow and turn, now a fish in the stream, following the stream in her deepest flow. A song of hello. Arriving at a time of deepening trouble, the slow cessations like clouds building all around, the affirmations of love, forgiveness, desire, not in the old and early ways, but in the deepest way. Say, I desire your presence. I desire you to go on, as we were before or in a new way, but here and near. A puzzling question, a new voice arising out of the stale scrolls of predictability, some small prodding hand reaching out of the blue, out of the turquoise or the topaz, a little question, some irrelevancy that nonetheless is a refreshment, drawing you back from wherever life has taken you to a place you once dwelt. How things were and how they came to be, how things are and how they still may be, a little distraction. Politeness requires an answer, despite the strong calls, in more pressing directions. Just a reminder, life goes on in a backsplash flow. You settle in and it shifts beneath you. You walk and run and it drops away, rises up, unexpected orientations, forever making meaning to the last day and beyond. I have woven you into a longer thread, so you may pass in peace when your own days slip and the fingers of life ease. So I think I contacted Mahmoud when I was researching love poetry. I came across an obscure, I don't know, story cycle or whatever. Anyway, from early Iran, pre-Iran, and I wanted to know more about it. So I wrote to 3 different people, 2 of whom became pen pals, and one of whom was Mahmoud, who became fast friends. He adopted me as his daughter in poetry, and I likewise adopted him as my father in poetry. So we published a few poems together. We had a correspondence. We were sending one another poems quite a bit, and I kind of distilled it down to a short collection. Also, he makes very beautiful visual art based on photographs of bark and wood, which he then recolors, and that is an example of his Akashi on the cover of the chapbook. So I'll just read a few of my poems to him, and if you would like to read the full collection and see the art, you can Google, let's see, Joanne Arnett at adjacent pineapple. Pensive and beyond. In a quiet house, in a room where music plays, in a quiet heart, in a tumultuous, busy crossroads, in a quiet moment, in a moment poised at the top of the wave, in a quiet pen, in a pensive eye within a hurricane, in a quiet sweep of pen on page, in a sweeping move from never was to fully made. The scritch, 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 sound of rich colors released in the world, the house or room, window or page, poem or bird, visited and revisited, flocks and migrations, the gift from the well of plenty, the gift from the unseen, the gift of return from that which was freely given, the gift. Some birds are angels. Long ago and far away. These are the keys to the places never returned to. These are the dreams of the child never born. The imaginary country siphons the blood of the real. Poems reincarnate. Look, she is a painting now. Arboreal Akashi. Akashi being the word Mahmoud came up with to describe his photo paintings. Between the window and the desk, the poet wanders, hesitant, wondering. Words may escape, words may travel freely, but poet is anchored to the world with several strong threads. Sometimes like a kite escaping for minutes on a good breeze, sometimes failing to achieve liftoff, entangled in screens of thought. Sometimes the constraints so paralyzing. Sometimes the net of love, longed for and secured. Perhaps the poet can fly forth on the wings of a wish or a poem well said. traveling through the bodies of trees on vocalizing winds. Trees sing back with elder powers, talent to remain, long, enduring. Beyond words, the poet sings back and forth to the song of trees, celebrating joys and sorrows through color and form. In the park, in the yard, far from home, nearby, a reciprocal song, pitched below the human ear, reassuring the human heart. My father in poetry. This is the last of the series for Mahmoud. I picture his house. Inside there are 1,000 books, elegant scrawl of Farsi, boxy pragmatics of English. I picture his apartment. Inside there are 10,000 books, dust-laden parchments, expansive scrolls. I picture his room. Inside there are 100,000 books, the internet, yes, of course, and all that came before. I picture his poem, inside of which he has just now found the oceans of time washing through him, the elegant birds lifting off once more. I think I'll close with one more poem. It's called My Dreams of You, and it is a poem for my late husband, Nick, who is a beautiful painter. You can see some of his work behind me. And I have been having a lot of visitations in my dreams from Nick and from other friends who have passed. Anyways, this poem is specifically about Nick, for Nick. My dreams of you. Recently, we tend to have long, earnest conversations, discussing the needs of our kids, sharing our insights. For the first year or more, we would come together in happiness, and then you would suddenly die again and again and again. My heart lifts to see you. My mind is attacked by the reality I have seen, but cannot absorb easily, hammering the truth home. Long ago, I dreamt that we had a child, one eye blue, one eye brown. When we reconciled, we had 2 children, one blue-eyed, one brown-eyed. They danced on the table together, small bodies of delight. We have always been on again, off again, so much love, so much that stood in our way. This week I have woken up trying to remove the dirt from my mouth. So those are some of my more recent works since 2016. Thank you again, Fauzia, for inviting me, and I look forward to sharing the evening with all of you. Good night.
And now I'd like to present to you Jónína Kirton, our featured poetess. Jónína, poet author who has 2 poetry books, Paid Ink as Blood, and An Honest 2017. The first one she received in 2016 Vancouver's Mayor's Arts Award for an emerging artist in the literary arts category. And the second collection was a finalist in the Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize. Jónína was a member of Room Magazine's editorial board, the curator of their online news-related poetry series Turtle Island Response, and a co-founder of the reading series Indigenous Brilliance. She graduated in 2017 from the SFU Writers Studio and is a long-standing member of their advisory board. Jónína is a Red River Métis Icelandic poet born in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba Treaty 1, and she now lives in Vancouver on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. She was 60 when she published her first book, and within years, within 3 years, she has emerged as an acclaimed and celebrated poet.
Hello, this is Jónína, Kirton, coming to you from New Westminster, ceded territory of Kwakwaka'wakw nations and other Coast Salish nations, including Stolo and Tsleil-Waututh, I believe. They're nations, but I do not know how to pronounce their names. So I am here today to read to you an essay. I am quite new to essay writing. This essay is about being mixed race. I come from an Icelandic grandmother side and a Métis grandmother on the other side. Both of my grandmothers spoke their mother and left their mother tongues behind at some point. So I did not learn either language, but I was, I believe, exposed to some of it. So the title, Standing in the Doorway, and I can thank Fred Waugh for this because he had, when speaking about being mixed race, that it was like standing in the doorway. And I really feel like that rung true for me in some regards. Standing in the doorway. Many mixed-race children live in two worlds. Children of between, we sides, and often feel like weakers as we try to help understand one another. I come from two very different and carried the need to help each one another into childhood. Fred Waugh recent interview, I've spent at least writing on this. The standing in the doorway is that you can inside and out. I don't know that I could ever stand either side, as while standing, I am simply and destined to forever be. Experience is mixed, and yet my of each culture is strong. All my ancestors pull on me. I hear their calls and feel their. I am the doorway they. And in a sense, I am an unintentional closing. Intentional gatekeeper, closing. When I role, I became an invited way, one the weaving of both cultures. Like many family were well, most of them determined devotion to passing as French. Yet from a young age, I knew of my small self that this was, but it would take before I would fully understand been taken from me and why of my ancestry. At first, all I knew, body loved the woods, that it was very brown, and that inside I felt like I knew things that only a real Indian would know. I did not want to wear shoes, as I needed to feel the earth under my feet. I wanted my hair to be long and not styled, but my white mum wanted me to be like her, fashionable and put together. She wanted to prepare me for marriage, while I wanted sovereignty and the woods. I knew I was different than her sisters and her, who also loved fashion, who thought a good marriage was the best option for a girl child. I most related to my Métis dad, who I resembled. He too loved to dress up, as we called it in those days, but he had other sides to him. A complicated man and humble man who once appeared in the local Paw newspaper after bowling a perfect score. The title of the article was Mystery Man, as he had snuck out after the game was over because he did not want the attention. It was not until I began my genealogy searches that I understood that he truly was a mystery man, one with many secrets. I found this denial of who we were confusing, and at 14, after spending summer in the Paw, where I met a number of people from the local reserve, I decided to confront my family. I started with my mum, who told me, yes, your dad is part native. She added, he hates being native, as if to caution me from asking him about it. She followed that up with something like, besides, it's not that relevant. There's just one little Indian, as we said in those days, back there. So what difference does it make? I knew she was wrong, but just how wrong would not be revealed until I was in my 50s. I was determined, so went next to my grandma Rose and her sister, who we called Aunt Eva. Both of them shook uncontrollably as their bodies were overtaken with fear that I had never seen or felt in them in the past. They both quickly blurted out denials. My grandma said, no, we're French. Many years later, I would tell my father that I had learned from his cousin that his mother, Grandma Rose, and her sister, Aunt Eva, used to speak Michif, to which he replied, oh, no. He thought they were speaking French. Or so he said. What my father knew or did not know has always been a mystery. Looking back, I suspect he had a secret life without us. I see now that he had many Métis friends, some of whom he would hang out with in Portage-la-Prairie, where both he and I were born. And then, when we lived in Goose Bay, Labrador, he preferred to play hockey with the Happy Valley Indigenous team, even though his co-workers all played for the officers on the base. I think back on the last names of his friends, their slick black hair. Men greased their hair in those days. All well-dressed, handsome men. I have wondered if it was these confusing messages about my own identity as a mixed-race woman that sent me into the arms of my first two husbands. Both were from immigrant families who were very rooted in their mother tongues and culture. My first husband, Paul, was German. His father had escaped from the Cold War. His father had escaped from the Cold War in East Berlin and the clutches of the Nazi youth groups that he was being pressured to join. His mother was from West Berlin, both clearly traumatized by what they had experienced in their home country. My second husband, Emilio, was Italian and had played professional hockey in Italy. In both instances, my mother-in-laws were stay-at-home mums who preferred their mother tongues but spoke English well enough for us to converse. Both of my fathers-in-law worked in jobs that required them to be more fluent in English, but even so, I could always feel the hesitation whenever they spoke this language. I could not help but notice how much more animated they were when they spoke their mother tongues. Even though I did not understand what they were saying, it was always delightful to watch and listen to them. Unlike my family, they knew their language and their culture. They knew who they came from. They knew who they were. Neither marriage lasted very long. Apparently, I was good at finding men to marry, but once there, I had no idea what to do. Both times I changed my last name when married, and once divorced, I went back to my maiden name, Kirton, which I still carry to this day. There is so much in a name. My last name, Kirton, is English. Yep, I am English, French, Scottish, Irish, Icelandic, and Swampy Cree, Ojibwe, Sakani, and who knows what else. My first name is Jónína, which is my Icelandic grandmother's name, but for some reason my parents decided to name me one thing but call me another. They said it was because it felt strange to call a baby Jónína, and my mother didn't believe in shortening names. I had to go by my middle name, Lynn. Knowing what I know now, I'm pretty sure they just didn't want me to have a foreign name, especially since my white mum was already being asked where she got me. When I reclaimed my name at 33, I did not use the accents and decided to forego the correct pronunciation as I kept getting mistaken for Spanish. It was easier to just say it as a J as one would in English, not Icelandic. By that time, I was so tired of being misidentified and asked what I was. At 40, I decided to once again sort out my ancestry. Since my family was not willing to share the truth with me, I used genealogy searches through the Saskatchewan Métis Nation, where my cousin was an enumerator. Our white mothers were sisters, and her very political Métis stepdad, Clarence Campeau, had been encouraging me to get my Métis status. When I received written confirmation that my grandmother Rose was indeed Métis, I wept. It was such a relief to see it written down. Even though I'd had enough information to claim Métis status, I wanted more details. The St. Boniface Historical Society could provide this, but only if I could convince my father to sign the necessary paperwork for me to get my grandmother's birth certificate and marriage certificate. Given my father's resistance to claiming his Indigenous ancestry, I knew this could be a challenge. It was my dear friend Laurie that managed to get him to sign. We both knew he could never say no to her. It was some time before it became clear that my English grandfather, Rose's dead husband, was also Métis. So much for the one little Indian theory. The French side had arrived in 1680 and moved across Canada, marrying locally. There were lots of Indigenous folk. Some signed half-breed treaties, and one 3 times great-grandfather, one 3 times great-grandfather, Jean Baptiste Boucher, also known as Wakan, a mixed-blood Swampy Cree, had been Simon Fraser's interpreter and guide when he came to BC. He spoke many languages, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. His role at Fort St. James is listed as enforcer. My feelings about him and all in my lineage who had a role in the settling of Canada are complicated. My more romantic ideas about being Indigenous were shaken, but it was too late now. I had to keep going. I had to understand why every time I heard someone speak Michif or Cree, I wanted to go sit on their knee. And yet, if I try to speak Michif, my tongue becomes thick with fear. I have a poem, a little excerpt in this piece. I can feel that Michif sleeps on my tongue. Within this body, filled with the memory of my grandmother, her body a shaking tent electrified by men in white coats. Treatment intended to simplify her ways, to remove the longing passed to me. Now she is gone, left without telling the words she grew up with, silenced by the need to raise 4 children as French. I recall the way I sat on her father's fiddle knee, and he sang the songs of our people to me. My body knows the music, my feet fly jigging in my chair, but I cannot get up on the dance floor, and even though Michif sleeps on my tongue, I cannot speak the words without shaking as she did every time I asked, Grandma Rose, are we native? This poem takes poetic license by blending the fact that my father's cousin had told me that I used to sit on my great-grandfather's knee while he sang songs to me in Michif, and the undeniable feeling that my body must have remembered these precious times with him. Why else would I want to sit on the knee of a stranger? Language lands deeply inside us. Perhaps it even lives on as the familiar feel of each word's unique vibration is passed on to our children who may have never heard the language. Perhaps our bodies recognize it, just as it recognizes the land of our ancestors. I know how my body hums when I'm on the prairies, my homeland. Imagine my surprise on my first and only trip to Iceland, where I found my connection to those lands and that language. Again, a little poem, an excerpt. It's titled, I'm in Iceland, Darling. They have poetry in the bathroom, uncredited text on blocks of wood, cheeky commentaries on life, some chilling reminders that those who live on shifting ground take their poetry seriously. It is Christmas in the mall, red everywhere, silver adornments for trees and tabletops. I find a coffee shop, listen to words I do not understand but feel familiar, and I want to lean in. I do not know if my grandmother spoke these words. I do not know if I have heard this before. All I know is that I'm leaning into her and that everywhere I go, I look for her face. I find her at a dinner party. She is pretty, and I am glad. Would she have been single too? A photographer, not a farmer, with 17 children? This apartment could have been hers. The old furniture, the artwork passed down. My grandmother had nothing to give me but love, and a check for $200 carefully noted in her will. The cost of diaspora long forgotten, no accounting methods to track what was lost, language the first to go. I just got off the phone with my mother's 80-year-old sister. She confirmed that not only did my grandmother Jónína speak Icelandic, but also she had taught her Irish husband, my grandfather. They would speak Icelandic when they didn't want the kids to know what they were saying. By the time my mother had her own children, the only evidence of her having grown up in a home with the Icelandic language and culture was the vínatarda, a traditional Icelandic cake that she would make at Christmas. My Métis grandmother's embroidery is the only evidence of her culture. Did she once do beadwork? Was this yet another thing she left behind as she made her way in the world as a widow with 4 children? Some in my family believe she once lived on a reserve, but when widowed she moved to town. Was this when she decided to not speak her language, to respond to her sisters in English, not Machif, to say she was French? These losses are like drop stitches when knitting. There are holes that cannot be repaired. Unlike a partially knit sweater, I cannot unravel the stitches and start over. I am where I am. And thankfully, some things, many important things, were not lost. I am a weaving of 2 very different cultures. Despite the loss of language, sorry that I got kicked out of my computer. Oh my goodness. I'm going to start that part over again. These losses are like the drop stitches when knitting. There are holes that cannot be repaired. Unlike a partially knit sweater, I cannot unravel the stitches and start over. I am where I am. And thankfully, some things, many important things, were not lost. I am a weaving of 2 different cultures. Despite the loss of language, the values and teachings were conveyed to me. Both of my parents embodied the worldviews that their parents, my grandparents, carried. Whether or not they were articulated, they do live on in me. I have always been between the wombs of my grandmothers, offered 2 worlds. I am also the doorway my son came through. He too has lived in 2 worlds and lives between the wombs of his grandmothers. He too stands in the doorway. He too will be the door, opening and closing, as he makes his way in this world as a mixed blood. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry about that. It's so frustrating. I'm almost done the reading, so I don't really want to have to start over again. My computer decided to shut down and take a little rest. I guess it thought we weren't doing anything, but we were filming. Anyway, I want to thank everyone again, the organizers, for having me, and for anyone and everyone who has worked with me and helped me along the way as a writer. One of those people is Joanne Arnett, who you will also be hearing from today. She has been a dear mentor to me, and I want to offer thanks to her as one of my poet elders. Anyway, blessings to you all and all my relations.
And for our last featured presenter, Tarek Hussein, our featured performer. He is a Juno-nominated singer-songwriter and recording artist who is also a member of the critically acclaimed Vancouver band Brastronaut. The songs on Tariq's latest solo offering, Telegrams, feel a bit like short stories, brief glimpses into fictional lives. Tariq is also a nonfiction writer whose essays on songcraft have appeared in Walrus magazine. He is currently working on a memoir about growing up as a first generation Canadian kid who dreams of playing in a rock and roll band. Tariq teaches lyric writing and creative writing program at UBC.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? My name is Tariq. Nice to be here on the Surrey Muse event. Thank you to Fazia for inviting me, and looking forward to just sitting here in my little spot that I normally do and playing some songs for you. I'm just clicking through to make sure my audio stuff's looking right. I think so. Got mics going. Okay. May as well just dive right into it. It started with a buzzing feeling. It turned into a ringing sound. So I fired up the headbolt heater, headed on into town. There was snow burning up in the headlights, and across on the side of the hill looked as cold as the steel in my right leg that I keep beneath the windowsill. Now I still get letters from some friends in the army, forwarded from my last address. Sometimes when I'm out feeding the horses, I feel something rising up in my chest, and I could drive through the night to see you. I could fly to England or France, or just slow down as I'm passing the schoolhouse. If you're finished teaching your night class, oh, hey, 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 oh, oh, oh. I keep my one glass eye in a bottle. It's always staring at me from the shelf. Talk about seeing your own reflection reflected back on yourself. But I'm not sorry I saw you, but I'm going back down that Coca-Cola highway low, 'cause the horses will be needing their road soon, and I'm sensing you got places to go. Hey, 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 oh. Lately I've been having the same dream. I'm falling out of the sky. I pull you up into my saddle and we ride on through the night. Lately I've been having the same dream. I'm falling out of the sky. I pull you up into my saddle and we ride on through the night. Oh, I'm having the same dream. I'm falling out of the sky. I pull you up into my saddle and we ride on through the night, through the night, through the night. There you go. The song's called Coca-Cola, and it is actually the opening song on this record here. That's what I'm playing a bunch of songs from this record called Telegrams, which I put out probably about 1 year ago. We had a nice album release show here in the city, and at the Culch. Loved that place. Beautiful old theater. That was something else. So keeping the songs alive and well. Still feels fun to play them on the guitar. It's always a good sign. And this is my little spot, by the way. This is the spot where I sit and write songs sometimes and work on other kinds of writing too. I'm working on some nonfiction writing, so this, I tend to be, I'm sure you all have your spots too, right? You probably have that one spot in your house, which is your writing spot. I hope it's a comfortable spot. I hope it's an inspirational spot. This certainly is for me. I'll tell you a little bit more about things that I can see out there. Characters that drift by my window, but we'll talk about that after. But here's a song about writing, or about a writer who is struggling to write. And of course, aren't we all struggling to write? This writer in this particular narrative might be a little bit misguided, perhaps about his abilities or potential for success, but that's okay. He can still be in this song. In fact, he is in a short story, which is where I first met this character, in a Laurie Moore short story called Visa d'Arte, about a struggling playwright. And I thought, well, why don't I put that struggling playwright in a song? Put a few chords around him and see how he fares here. So here's a song called First Draft. So many scenes to write, this coffee-stained paper curls. We won't be this bored for long. I'm tired of being last, lagging like a desperate dog under the shaky moon. Howling tunes. Now the water keeps backing up to the sink in the tub. So I'll call the landlord soon. And if he don't come, well then I'll call the plumber. The worst thing is the bed at night. It's like sleeping in a block of ice. 'Cause everything was easier with you here. Days don't falter and they don't stutter. Sometimes it's hard to breathe. Damn these trucks and their diesel engine. While I'm still trying to write my play, once I get the first draft done, I'll be working on the second one. Can't make the plot turn back, or the third act just won't seem real. How's life on the Upper West Side? Someday I'll move there with you. Someday I promise, baby. By then I'll have my own marquee. And then the golden lights will blink at me. Everything was easier with you here. Days don't falter and they don't stutter. Oh, but sometimes it's hard to breathe. Damn these trucks and their diesel engine. While I'm still trying to write my play, once I get the first draft done, I'll be working on the second one. I'm still trying to write my play. Once I get the first draft done, I'll be working on the second one. And so, our writer continues to struggle, foraging around, trying to find the right words. It's something that we probably can all relate to. Just having a little water here, keep things. Boy. Yeah. Coughing sounds real interesting when you got reverb going with it at the same time, doesn't it? Okay, what are we going to do next? Well, I was going to tell you about what was out there, wasn't I? Can't make that promise and then not come through. Well, I'll tell you what's out there. I don't want to move the computer to show you what's out there, but I will tell you that it's a bit of a cat highway out there. The cats go through. I've kind of a couple of French doors here, and the cats just, they wander through. The neighborhood cats. There's 3 or 4 different ones. I'm trying to find a picture of what they do because they sit there and they stare into my window at me. It's kind of, here's one. So the other day, there we go. There was a cat sitting right there. That was what he was doing. Just looking in the window at me while I was working away. I got a better one for you. There's another guy who's also really interesting. This one. How do you like that guy? Yeah. So he was there as well on a different day. I just happened to look up and boom, I catch those little yellow eyes just looking at me through the window. It's kind of hilarious. So I've had a history of running with these cats over the years. I think there's been different ones. There's often been a black one, and often with like very piercing eyes. I don't know if that means anything or is significant in any way, but I decided that one day when I was working on this song that I would put the cat in the song. He would get to make a cameo because I figured maybe that's kind of what he wants to, have be in the song instead of outside the door staring in. So I put him in there just briefly. He just kind of makes a quick appearance, and it's not till later in the song. But anyway, I'll play that song for you now. It's not about cats, but it does have the cameo appearance of one of the neighborhood felines in it, and this is called Heart-Shaped Necklace. Well, the night's burning off like a candle while we're out here collecting stars. You keep calling out, oh, I saw another one fall, but I haven't seen anything fallen so far. But when I do, I'll be certain to tell you. Until then, I am keeping your name safe behind this cracked bullseye window. Sometimes at night it lets in the rain. Sometimes it lets in the rain. While your mother recites from a prayer book, I learned of your mysteries there on a blanket of leaves in a forest. Pieces of sunlight fell out of your hair. Then you took out your smoking tobacco. You said this kind's not so bad for your health. And I studied the arc of your fingers, rolling up paper into the shape of a barrel. Yeah, paper in the shape of a barrel. Well, so long, you fake heart-shaped necklace, you said as you blew in your hands before you threw it into the ocean. You said I could be your man. You said I could be your man. through a patch of light, and a black cat stared into my soul. Now past the farm to a burned out barn, the babies cried out from their satellite burrows, and the last thing you said resembled a prayer, and you took off your clothes and you cut off your hair. And I'm still not sure what's really up there, but sometimes I like to pretend like I know. Sometimes we pretend like we know. So that's a song called Heart-Shaped Necklace. Thank you so much. Okay, yeah. Cats getting their cameos in my songs. What else is happening? What else is happening? Part of me feels a little like I'm in a radio studio, because I used to do radio shows at CBC, and there was that funny thing where you're actually you are talking to people, but it's the radio, and so you don't get a immediate reaction. You don't really know who's listening. You tell a joke, you hope somebody laughs. You're not really sure what it is. There was like blogs, and there was some interactive things, so you did get a sense of people being out there. But a lot of times, even when you were doing your live show, you would be doing exactly what I'm kind of doing here, talking into a mic and not necessarily knowing what was who was on the receiving end of it. We also pre-tape shows, which is a bit of like what I'm doing now. So all this pre-taping, and I've done some other situations of pre-taping as well. Music, doing some pre-taping of music, and it definitely reminds me of those days of working just down on Hamilton and Robson there at the CBC building, doing hosting shows for CBC Radio 3. So I've always been intrigued by the radio. I kind of got my first music education through the radio. In fact, a small pocket radio that my mom gave to me, and I listened to that and got schooled on the pop hits of the time, and got very intrigued and interested in music via the radio. It's kind of it's sort of an old school thing, but so I still, I don't listen to the radio as much, and I don't have a car, so I don't drive around listening to the radio, but I do have a little clock radio in the bedroom that sometimes I'll just flick on, and it really sort of feels kind of nostalgic in that way. Of course, I listen to podcasts and other things digitally, but there's something about the old terrestrial radio. So here's a bit of an anthem to the old terrestrial radio, the one that sits on your kitchen counter, and you pull out those antennae to pick up the stations. It's called Radio Song. The radio song slips into my ear, the same one I heard so long ago. It plays through the flight as they dim those cabin lights, and we cross the line of darkness into the morning. Now the radio song is always coming in strong, and it helps me find my way back home to you. I hear it outside my hotel on the street in San Miguel, and it goes across the alley and up through a trumpet bell. And it goes, let me be your radio, let me play your song while the signal's strong. Whisper in my ear, tell me what you want to hear, 'cause I'm your radio. Because the radio song is leading the way. Some people say it's Jesus, some people say it ain't. Maybe what they're hearing is not same thing that I hear in this barroom in Oaxaca. When I think of you, my dear, I think let me be your radio. Let me play your song while the signals stroke, whisper in my ear and tell me what you want to hear. 'Cause I'm your radio. Oh, let me be your radio. Let me play your song while the signals stroke, whisper in my ear. Tell me what you want to hear. I'm your radio. I'm your radio. I'm your radio. All right, a little bit of a radio love, radio song there for you. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you again for Surrey Muse and Fozzie for inviting me to be part of this event. And I know we were, technically supposed to all be doing it all live and all that, but we can make, we can make the radio waves transfer somehow. We can get those signals out there digitally while we have to, and we can make that work. So I think I'll do one more song for you from the Telegrams record, and hope to be able to see you sometime down the line. In the meantime, if you want to hear more of the songs off the Telegram records, it's up there on the old streaming sites like your Spotify's and your Apple Music's, and also findable on Bandcamp and SoundCloud, and my own website as well. So I think maybe we'll post some links or something, rather than me trying to say links on the video form. It's not going to be that useful, I don't think. So probably better that other way. So I'm going to end on a song that's maybe a little bit of a apocalyptic kind of song. I think that's what I had in mind when I was writing this, sort of imagining that movie scene, end of the world in the movie scene, and all right. Thank you again. Let's try it out. This is called Crooked Mouth. Well, it's last call for the moon, so we crawl towards the edges of the light, to stand in your apartment and wait to fill our glasses at the sink. And you run the water for a minute over your fingers pointing downwards at the drain. And in that minute I'm afraid that you might disappear like shadows in light rain. And I think this radio is broken, can't find a signal or a sound. Forgot the letters to the password, I guess I should have wrote it down. So bring on the sharp teeth of the morning, let's crawl inside its crooked mouth, while the flames shoot down the wires, two circuits shorting underground. signal sound. I forgot the letters to the password. I guess I should have wrote it down. So bring on the sharp teeth of the morning. Let's crawl inside its crooked mouth while the flames shoot down the wire. 2 circuits shorting underground. Well, it's last call for the moon, too soon to be returning to the play, where your shadows meet the light rays in a perfect chiaroscuro in a frame, in a frame. One called Crooked Mouth. Thank you again for having me. Nice to be part of this event, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in the near future in the flesh, and or you never know, maybe back here on Zoom too. Why not? In the meantime, hope you all stay well, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care. Peace.
And now for our open mic session. It begins with Stuffy Toddy, and I would like to introduce her. She is a Filipina-Canadian poet and writer based in Vancouver. She's published her debut collection of poems titled, I Didn't Want to Be Read, I Wanted to Be Believed In, with Frog Hollow Press in 2019. Her articles and poems have appeared in various publications, including Schema Magazine, Medium, and Train, a poetry journal. She has presented her work at Massey Books, SFU's Lunch Poems, and various events at UBC. Born and raised in Manila, Philippines, Steffi is an aspiring writer and a furious reader. She lifts up her hands in gratitude to Squamish, to Tsleil-Waututh, and West Musqueam nations on whose lands she now lives. One of her current and pressing goals is to write a funny poem.
Hi everyone, I am Steffi. Good evening. I'm very grateful to be part of this reading series alongside Jónína, Joanne, Tariq, and Mariam. I must admit it hasn't been easy to feel buoyant during these times, but I find that whenever I'm with artists and I get to hear people's stories and incredible voices, I do find a lot of strength and hope for the work before us. So yeah, tonight I will be sharing 3 new-ish poems, and the first one is called Prayer at Red Gate. If God were a DJ, I'd ask her how she spins and moves the needle. I don't detest the lightning in her tracks, but something in me yearns to know what a bolt is for, before the earth I am made of disappears underneath the jazz-dappled streets, my joints and seams touching the rusted trumpets, saxophones, and cymbals. The point is to live. It all belongs. The poet I look up to writes and wrote for how many years, listening with his whole body, a bounce off an orange rim, the swish before the shot, nothing short of miraculous. What I wish for myself, I wish with both my arms for you, a confetti blessing I wish I dove and shimmied towards. I grew up in a house with a lot of sports and music and also faith, and I think now as a grown up and these times I was trying to find a way to metabolize all of that, and I hope my intention for the poem was for it to be a sort of honest gesture towards being more open to receive their joy that's in front of me. The second poem I will be sharing is called Pre-Existing Conditions. When the teacher said that the tragic and the comic are parts of the same whole, I laughed. More than 500 years ago, Spain and Portugal divided the world in half, so it was not uncommon to hear, "I own half of you." I am laughing, so I won't cry. Like a headstrong historian, I wanted to probe what centuries of being owned catapults into a psyche, but spending time as a function of money in a city that unroofs as often as it rains, just plug in entities to replace Spain and Portugal for the moment, and most likely the hustle leaves you a husk. Facing the bathroom mirror, say subservience, a pill on the counter you swallow before daybreak. Subservience, 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 until you arrive at subversive. Over and over across Mountain View Cemetery, over and over on Marple, over and over on Cessnam. Propped up on a lazy boy and gazing at Monterona's paintings in the basement of a graying house on living land that refused to be sold, I dreamt of coconuts smashed and smashing on the ground. Today, July 24th, is actually my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom, if you're watching. My mom lives in Manila, and I'm here in Vancouver. And I think being a migrant and a settler means that, like, you have your heart and your brain in many different places. And I wrote this last poem that I want to share with my mom in mind. So I will just try to adjust, sorry, so I can see. Okay. Where we meet. On the train ride from Richmond Brick House to City Center, an elderly woman took out a miniature tub of petroleum jelly from her purse and lined her fingers with its grease, massaging the space between her thumb and index, the middle finger down to the pinky. I don't know why I kept staring, as if I had to memorize the fine print of a moving photograph, one I would need at some point, like that time I saw two women walking hurriedly towards each other inside a packed movie house and hugged. Hand and hair on each other's shoulders, they smiled with a smile you reserve for a beloved you have not seen in years, their eyes like lights strewn on a 12-foot pine tree. It is Christmas Eve, and from a distance, the mind behind my eye cannot help but see fireflies flickering in the forest, bordered by a snow globe. But from the burgundy chair where I sit by the aisle, two women stand, their arms are glad. The show is just about to start, the steps still lit. And so that's it for me. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
A poem by H.W. Bryce, entitled I Live in a Poem. I live in a poem. This is my comfort zone. Here are the daffodils and the daisies and the roses, the chrysanthemums. Here lives the wisdom wrought from the cauldron of the outside world. Here are my memories of the future. Here in this poem are the ways to live, the ways the world doesn't seem to know. Here's the rhythm, here's the beat, here's where you take a seat, the seat that you deserve. Here too is the inspiration, the honor, the ode to your living spirit. Here in this poem lay seas and oceans and rivers and streams that carry adventure and ship your dreams into the world for the sharing and the caring and the tender touch and the healing that we all hanker for. Here, inside this poem, I can wander, I can wonder, test and try again, and write and sing and dance and celebrate. Here be lullabies and dances and the prances of unicorns and princes and princesses, gentle heroes and pretty lasses, fairy godmothers, wise fathers, hero brothers and little sisters, proper English and tongue twisters, hypotheticals, and even the realities. And here is full of dreams. Here is where dreams do come true, tried and tested in every hue, where life is never colored blue. Yes, I live in a poem, where all is right and just, where you can do what you must and be what you need to be and no regrets, where friends are multiple and also true. Here is where there is no hunger, no hate, no disease, no bait to do ill upon anyone, no self-loathing, and God help us, never a war, but ever there is peace. Sure, it is all a daydream, but what you dream, you become. And I wish to become my dream. I wish for all to live inside of my poem, where life is good, folks are generous, children are well and safe and free, and smiles are plentiful, hugs are warm, and cheeks are often kissed. Here in my dream, it is calm, it is funny, it is dance and music, good food, good people, cooperation, helping, not hindering, more giving than taking, honesty, not faking, warm handshakes, praise where praise is needed, perpetual puppies and kinky little kitties, and all that is good, because outside of my poem is cruelty and evil and killings and war, and none of that do we need any more. So, welcome to my poem, where I live, my friend. Here, inside of my poem, where is kindness and fulfillment, and they live here. Long may reside in peace, here inside of my poem. Thank you very much.
that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So put your eyes in mine.